To Bonhoeffer, I will simply say that I didn't want to be a biographer when I grew up, and I'd like to think that I'm still not a biographer, although I have written 2 biographies. The way they came about was that in my 24th year in life, I'd gone to Yale University, which you may know is slightly secular. And whatever faith I had growing up, I was raised in the Greek Orthodox Church. I lost at Yale because that's what they do with one's parents' money. And I graduated quite confused. And I had, in my 24th year, a real conversion experience, quite dramatic. And now, from that point on, have called Jesus Lord and been an outspoken Christian. And at some point in my career, I wanted to be a writer. I wrote some books of Christian apologetics, really popular level, with the title, Everything I Always Want to Know About God, But We're Afraid to Ask. Because I kept thinking of all the people that I knew, that I grew up with, who were lapsed or nominal Catholics, who were some kind of vague pseudo-Protestants, or who were just agnostics wandering through life. I thought, how do you engage those people? And those are the most of the people that I have known growing up. It's not about arguing somebody into the faith, because people aren't, they sort of have a vague idea that God exists. And if you look at the polls and things, it seems obvious that most people, I would say, are generally inclined to believe something, but they don't know where to look. They've got some friends that are really hardcore born-again nuts or hardcore Catholic nuts, and they don't want to talk to those people. Who do they talk to? Well, everything else seems to be secular, and I thought I'd like to write a book that's very kind of gingerly, cheerfully talking about the big questions from a very broadly ecumenical Nicene Creed kind of point of view. And so I did that, and that led to my being on CNN, being asked about this, and I expected some really difficult questions of theodicy or something, and instead I got a question about William Wilberforce, whom I had mentioned very briefly in the book. And so I found myself talking on CNN about Wilberforce, and if you watch CNN, you may notice that they don't often talk about Wilberforce or theodicy. But this led to being asked to write a biography of William Wilberforce. And Wilberforce is one of these heroes of the Christian faith who, because of his faith in Jesus, gave his life in politics to do the right thing and to stand against the slave trade and so much more, which I cover in the book. It's hard to believe what this man accomplished. It's almost unbelievable, except it's true. And then everyone asked me who I'd like to write about next. And I didn't really want to write another biography, but to make the long story a little shorter, I thought Bonhoeffer for a number of reasons, because my mom is German, grew up in Germany during this period, and I really was so amazed that a man, because of his Christian faith, would stand against the Nazis in this way, die in a concentration camp, that we wouldn't know this story. It just seemed to me scandalous, and there's something about his story which I thought needed to be told. Little did I know that I would write such a big book. Little did I know it would do so well. I can say bluntly that I'm not used to success. I'm used to working hard and praying and hoping that someday the Lord would open a door. To have that door opened is a shock, which it shouldn't be if you have real faith, but I think sometimes we have to admit that we don't have as much faith as we thought we did. And so the success of the book has amazed me. I had the privilege of getting a handwritten note from George W. Bush, who'd loved the book. And then when I was asked to speak at the prayer breakfast, I jokingly said that, George W. Bush had read it. And as we all know and we've all read, he's intellectually incurious. So, and I looked over at the president and I said, no pressure. And then if that wasn't enough, I handed him a copy ostentatiously of the book and again said, no pressure. And then handed him a copy of the Wilberforce book and said, no pressure. I know you have time to read on plane ride, so here you go. And just made a joke of it. But he said he would read it, and of course I hope he will, if only to see that wonderful people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer could believe that abortion is in fact taking of a human life. As I say, I've been amazed by the reception of the book. I think the reason, in part, is that, and I hear this so much that I can hardly believe it, but I know that it's true, that there's something about the story of Bonhoeffer which reminds most readers of what we're living through today. Now, when I set out to write the book, I went into it the way I wrote Wilberforce, totally ignorant. I just thought, well, it's just an interesting story. I know the basics, and I can tell the story. Hopefully I can tell it well to engage others and to educate others about this great life. And in the course of doing so, I discovered things that surprised me. It surprised me to discover anything that surprised me. I thought that, the basics are the basics, but there was a lot. And one of the things about Bonhoeffer is that he was not theologically liberal, as I had been led to believe, or at the end of his life become some kind of agnostic, some kind of humanist. That's simply not true, and I was shocked to find out that it's absolutely clearly not true, that he stays a very faithful Christian to the end. And that this idea of religionless Christianity, in fact, Tom Howard, whom I mentioned earlier, I remember when I mentioned I'm writing a book about Bonhoeffer, he said, that's the guy who put forward this idea of religionless Christianity. And I said, yeah, except he meant precisely the opposite of what everyone thinks he meant by that. He means robust, actual Christianity as opposed to dead religion, where people just go through the motions and don't really believe it or live it, like that 98% that uses contraception. So I was also surprised, finally, by what I discovered in terms of the parallels. As I was writing this, I thought, this sounds so strangely familiar, and there are parallels to today. And I went out of my way not to underscore the parallels in the book, because I just wanted it to be a work of biography, but I thought, this is extraordinary that I'm writing something that is about a time and a place that's so different from where we are, and yet the more I write about it, the more I'm struck by the parallels. And you can overdraw the parallels, and you should not. At the same time, not to see them is hard. I'm just amazed by some of these things, and I'm sorry to say that I see these parallels. I really wish I didn't, but it's kind of interesting. I think it's the reason that the book has done so well, because I think a lot of Americans have read it and said, wow, this is a warning for us. And I see Bonhoeffer's voice as a prophetic voice. I see him as someone who, like Isaiah or Jeremiah, was saying things to call the people of God to be the people of God. And we know it's always a struggle for the people of God to actually be the people of God. And that in his day, clearly, his voice was not heeded. And his voice, if it's prophetic, is really the voice of God. It's not Bonhoeffer's voice. But I think that somehow we might today be getting a second chance, just as we can today say, wasn't Isaiah a great guy? And take what he says seriously. I hope that the story of Bonhoeffer can wake up the church today so that we don't make the same mistakes and go down the same road. I don't think we need to, but I think we can and we will if we don't repent and wake up.